Okay, hello fellow English students who are ever look at my vlog thingy.
I can't hear you.
I'm not talking at the moment.
Oh.
Anyway, so I'm, as you might know from a few posts and comments and some things I've said in class and to relate to stuff, my dad was in the Navy, and so I'm going to do a short interview with him about his time in that to compare and contrast it to how the trench warfare is described in All Quiet on the Western Front. Okay, I'm going to turn the camera now, and it's going to be facing my father. And if you hear noises in the background, that is my dog, and now it is not my dog because he's not doing it anymore. Okay, I'm going to do this now. That is my father.
Hey.
Say hi.
I'm Ralph Jones Jr.
Uh-huh. Same name as me.
Father of Ralph Jones number 3.
Indeed. Okay. I'm going to ask you a few questions, as I just said I was going to do to the camera. Okay. So, in general, what was it like on a submarine?
On a submarine?
Yeah.
If you want to know what it's like on a submarine, go in your bathroom at home, take 10 people with you do not know, shut the door, and stay there for 90 days. You'll know just what it's like. No windows, no sunlight. Take turns sleeping in the same rack. That's what it's like.
And
It's kind of when I was in the 60s, and even now on submarines, they can have no contact with the outside world. That's why it's called a silent service. When you go out and go down, there's no communication with the outside the world. No TV, no radio, no phone, no internet, no communication whatsoever. Only your command officer knows where you are. You don't even know where you are sometimes unless he elects to tell you. And you go on a mission for 90 days, and you do not see the outside world, do not see sunshine, don't know if it's 2 a.m. or 2 p.m. You do that for like 90 days at a time.
So, in class we had a substitute, Mr. Jacobs, and someone told someone he knew that it's better to be in the Navy than in the Army, because in the Army you could either come back and like all of you, or you could get a limb amputated. But in the Navy, you either come back or you don't.
Yeah, that's a good reason. If I'd gone into the Army, it was in 1966, and Vietnam was going on, and at that time they were taking 18-year-old kids like me, training for 10 weeks, and shipping them straight to Vietnam.
Now, in All Quiet on the Western Front, the main character Paul and some of his friends from school are encouraged by their teacher to join the war effort during World War One. Anyway, and they weren't actually drafted. They volunteered because they were kind of told that they'd be honorable and they'd be heroes to their country. Now, would you say that after you returned home, did you feel like a hero?
No.
And exactly, because at one point in the book, Paul goes back, is on leave from the front, and no one really gets him anymore. He doesn't really fit into civilian life as much.
With the guys coming home now from Afghanistan, people saying thank you for your service and that sort of thing. But back, and when I got back when I got off active duty in 1968, people would spit on you and call you baby killers, and there was a big anti-Vietnam War sentiment, and even people in a submarine who never went to Vietnam, we still got accused of being baby killers because of the Vietnam War.
And something like that, we read a poem, well, some of us, about World War I, in which a veteran, they had this thing, it's called Back by Wilfred, I forget his last name. Anyway, but he basically says that he's addressing people who are blaming him for doing such horrible things that happened in World War I, even though in the end the soldiers don't really choose to do these things so much as their commanders and the leaders of the country.
That's right. Plus, when you're on a battlefield, it says your life or the other guy in a lot of cases.
That's a lot of what they say in All Quiet.
You have no choice but to be a murderer in some cases, or to be a victim.
Now, I'm going to talk about three things. In All Quiet on the Western Front, whenever the shelling stops and the German soldiers take to their machine guns to fire at the British or French soldiers coming across no man's land, it's described as if they're animals.
Yeah.
Like they go up there and they just kill what's in front of them. So.
Yeah.
And at one point, Paul, he has to sneak across no man's land to gather some intelligence, and he plays dead in a shell hole, and a French soldier comes in and he has to kill him. And that's the first time in the book he actually feels guilty, because he looks through the soldier's stuff and finds his name and a picture of his family.
I can understand that.
Like, and in a book we read first over the summer, Dawn, Elisha, the main character, he's killed a few. He's an Israeli freedom fighter fighting for independence from Britain.
Yeah.
And he's killed a few people, but he's never killed anyone face to face. And the book revolves around an inner conflict he has, because he has to execute a British commander named John Dawson, who, since he knows him, his name anyway, and later knows him because he talks to him a bit, has this conflict that it's not killing for something now, it's murdering for something.
Yeah, well, like when I was in service, you had orders. You obeyed your orders, or you risked severe reprimand. So whatever you were told to do, you just did. I mean, that's what you're trained to do, and that's how you did it.
No, speaking of orders, which come from commanding officers, brilliant transition anyway. What was your commander? Did you have a commanding officer?
Yeah, we had a commanding officer.
What was he like?
Executive officer. Well, our commanding officer was Lunchquist was his name. I can still remember his name, but at the time he didn't get along with his wife very good, so he stayed at sea all the time, which means we stayed at sea all the time. So E on the side of a boat or ship means efficiency, but what it boils down to, he learned that because we're doing all kinds of missions and at sea all the time and at home very little. And as far as the CO, you didn't talk to him. He was like a little king aboard the submarine.
Now, a character in the novel, Himmelstas, he was a mailman when you see him in flashbacks, but he becomes their drill sergeant, and he really just bosses them around and picks on them a lot. And the character Chayden, I have no idea how to pronounce his name. No one does. It's kind of hilarious. Anyway, so the character, he kind of is like terrified of the entire ordeal and kind of what's his bed, and he gets made. Himmelstas just straight up abuses him over it, and then just this person who used to be this nice mailman becomes this bully who just, because he's able to, he gets power.
Yeah.
And later on, he actually has to go to the trenches, and afterwards, he's a lot nicer to them because he sees what they've been through.
Oh yeah, I've seen people like that. And the power would go to the head, and in fact, they can boss somebody around, and they got the kicks by doing that.
Have you heard of the Stanford Prison Experiment?
The what?
Stanford Prisoner Experiment.
No.
Basically, a couple guys, they volunteered for it, and half of them were prisoners, were set up as prisoners, and the other half as officers.
Yeah.
And they were made it into a social experiment in which the officers could do pretty much what they want as long as they didn't kill them. And they ended up humiliating them and beating them. And even one of them, he actually made a character for himself to play, as if to say he wasn't doing that. But in the end, they let it get too far, and in the end, it was shut down a lot of almost 2 weeks before it was supposed to end.
Yeah. Because
it got out of hand.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, I don't know how it is in the Army, but I know how it is in the Navy, in the submarine Navy anyway. Submarine Navy is totally different than the surface Navy. In the submarine Navy, you're not allowed to talk about where you were, how deep the buggy go, how fast it go. You have a top secret clearance. You're not allowed to tell anybody anything. And we actually carried nuclear warhead torpedoes on board the whole time we were on. And at that time, it was classified information. Now it's public knowledge, but back then, you couldn't tell anybody.
And nuclear weaponry, it was made in World War II, and in World War II, there's a lot of experimentation with new machinery and devices for warfare, and but it really all that started back in World War I, when there was a clash between old tactics and modern machinery, like gas and machine guns
Oh,
and
yeah.
artillery shells,
Mhm.
and it ended up, and you just saw my mom walking by. Anyway, and basically, it got really bad really fast because they were basically in the trenches, and they'd fire a few rounds, they'd shell a lot, they shoot a lot of shells, and whenever it stopped, the other side would get up and start shooting at them, and basically thousands of lives were lost to gain a few feet of ground, a few yards.
Yeah.
And it's described as one of the most devastating wars in history because it basically, all those lives were lost for barely anything. Like, you look back at history and the 300 Spartans when they kicked a bunch of Persians' butts, according to history, even though it's probably not exactly true.
Yeah.
Because I doubt 300 Spartans could take on 2 million Persians anyway. But, and then suddenly, when your tactics go from, have better armor and, shield tactics like the Spartans, to who can shoot the most first, and then get out of the way before the others shoot, it just doesn't work as well.
Well, in the submarine, I never shot anybody, but we blew up ships. We blew up with torpedoes and undetected. We blew up a lot of ships. They said they always told us they were, practice ships. There wasn't enemy ships firing at us. They were some of them needed to be scuttled. So as practice, we would blow them up and they would sink. So we've done that many times when I was in. I actually blew up one with C4 package where I had to swim out to the ship and use a magnetic mount to mount to the bottom of the hull, and then swim back, and then they blew it up remotely.
Okay, I'm going to turn this around real quick.
Alright.
So, you could probably guess by now that Navy's a lot different from the Army, because fundamentally they're just two completely different things. But, they're